Alrighty, guys, welcome to tonight's charting session. Hopefully, everybody is doing well. It is Monday, September 11th. We're going to talk about the action going into today, my bias going into today. We did not trade in the AM session. I decided to take the AM off starting today. I'm no longer going to be trading AM sessions on Mondays, right? Going back inside my journal, I just noticed that Monday mornings are just my least profitable time of day and day to be trading in general. So there's really no point for me to be trading that action when, statistically speaking, it's just lower quality, lower probability for me to take better setups. So most of the time, if I'm ever trading Mondays, I'm going to wait for the first 2 hours or so to really settle down or trade the PM session. So, and that's what I did today. So going into the morning on NASDAQ, talking about my bias going into the morning. Now, going into the morning, I had a little bit of a loose bias, and the reason is because we were in between two imbalances here. So on the 4 hour, we were rejecting this big 4 hour, and this is kind of where I was really watching to have our bias be formed for the rest of the week, because now that we've broken through this, which we'll talk about more later, I am going to be pretty bullish going into the rest of the week. Now, going into today, you can see retracing back into that daily fair value gap. Remember, always zooming out to a bigger time frame to just give us easier context. We're still holding this daily fair value gap, respecting consequent encroachment of that area. We rejected off that 4 hour or that order block, and we're now starting to get volume to the upside. Now, the last line of defense for shorts is this 4 hour fair value gap. So if we were going to continue to respect this area and get displacement to the downside, then we could potentially expect to see lower. But notice, we came up, swept that internal high here. We had that move down, but no break of structure on a bigger time frame, right? There's no really we get that move to the downside, but there's no low here getting broken. And actually, this was just a retracement back into this 4 hour bullish fair value gap. So going into the morning, let's zooming into the 15-minute. We came down and actually ended up sweeping this internal sell side. So at this point of time, I'm very cautious taking any sort of shorts down here. The reason is because I'm actually looking for us to now retrace back into that 15-minute fair value gap. Notice if I draw from high to low here, our consequent encroachment is around that area that lines up with that high and that fair value gap. And we're in a 4 hour bullish fair value gap. So a lot of the time, just looking at structure, normally when we get a big move down like this, we retrace back into that imbalance in OTE or discount of whatever that range is. So that's kind of my bias going into when I first started looking at the charts today, which was at 11 a.m. So zooming in, I was watching this, and I actually noticed we had an SMT start to form. So NQ ends up making a higher low, while ES, on the other hand, ended up making a lower low. And an also point of interest as well that we want to start seeing a bounce from, right? So this is kind of what we want to start thinking about. And that's kind of how I start to think about forming a bias, is what is in my favor of what that bias is, right? Number one, well, we just swept internal on a smaller time frame. We just now formed an SMT that's bullish on a smaller time frame as well, and we're holding a bigger point of interest that I'm watching for, which is a bullish 4 hour fair value gap. So right now, there's really no reason for us to go lower here, right? Now, until we were to actually run through that bearish fair value gap, then I would be a lot more bearish and could potentially expect to see the lower lows down here, right? But if we were going to continue to hold this and then get displacement back to the upside, then that validates back towards longs, expecting price to definitely go back to that recent high, right? Because again, all the markets are doing here, and the way that we like to think about it, is just moving from imbalance to imbalance. What's being respected, what's being disrespected. So looking at a 4 hour, if we're in between these two imbalances here, and we look at this chart and say, okay, we've now respected this bearish fair value gap first, right? Because that's the first thing we did, is we came up after that fair value gap was formed. We haven't touched into it yet. We come up, reject this 4 hour imbalance. So now where do you think we're going to go? We're going to go to the next imbalance. The next imbalance is this bullish fair value gap on the 4 hour. So now that we're in this, we're looking for this to get respected or disrespected, right? So at this point in time, I'm waiting, watching price action, and seeing the signs to tell me, am I bullish or should I be bearish here, right? Now, again, I'm looking at all the things that are giving me a bias. Number one, we just swept internal sell side. We're bouncing off. We're having not really a desire to go lower. If I zoom in price, you can notice in the morning we had strong selling pressure. But at the lows, you can see all that pressure starts to fade out and we start to have consolidation. So this is telling me that we're probably going to put a base in here to possibly bounce back towards buy side, right? So I zoom in and I see a little bit of a scalp opportunity right here. When we end up forming this SMT, I'm looking to see us bounce off of this daily fair value gap, or this 4-hour fair value gap, and go back into that 15-minute imbalance, right? Because we know that on a 15-minute balance, if we were in a bearish model here, which it could be, right? We don't know necessarily until we see what happens. We know that we're going to retrace back into this anyway. So, right? So why not try to find a setup to maybe target that internal draw on liquidity, right? Because price could, come up here and then dump, but it also could come up here and, go right through it. But we know that we have to go here first before that making that decision, right? So let's take advantage of knowing that internal draw on liquidity because we haven't hit it yet, and try to find a setup that we can use to target that area, right? So that's what I basically did. Is I noticed we had SMT, we swept sell side. Again, notice there's not really, I wouldn't really be looking to take anything here yet because there's not enough structure. There's not enough confluence. On a bigger time frame, there's no SMTs. We have really no break of structure to the upside yet. You could say it's this right here, but notice we come up, form equal highs just for this to get ran through back to the downside. So I'm still waiting for structure, And at this point in time, when we get this SMT and I notice that the rejection to go lower, and I notice at the time as well, looking at ES, let me pull up ES here. ES has just swept sell side as well, and now forming that internal low. So I'm watching ES, noticing we just put a new low in. Go to the 1 minute. And now we're starting to get displacement back to the upside, right? So this is telling me we're probably going to put a low in. And what can I expect ES to now go to? I can expect ES to go to whatever that previous high is, right? Which is here. So that's what my bias is, right? Both ES and NQF swept sell side. We're in a bullish 4-hour fair value gap. We're having break of structure to the upside. And now what gives me even extra confirmation and what I use to enter is once this fair value gap gets ran through, again, I'm looking to take an inverse and an overlapped fair value gap. So not only do I get break of structure here with displacement, follow through, I also get this fair value gap getting ran through to the upside, as well as a bullish fair value gap formed here. This to me is enough confluence saying, we're bouncing off 4-hour. We have SMT. We have market structure shift. We swept sell side. We have an inverse getting ran through. Now acting as inverse. We have a bullish. Everything is in my favor now, right? This is what you call high probability setups, is when you can constantly look and see every little thing add to your bias. That is what is a high quality setup, right? Whenever we say A plus or B plus, C plus, all that is saying is how many things can you add on to that confluence to give you that confident bias, right? And with this specific trade, there's a lot of things here. We have 4-hour, fair value gap. We have a 15-minute fair value gap acting as a draw on liquidity, right, from a bearish model, which is bullish at the time. We have sell side swept internally. We have a market structure shift to the upside internally. We have a fair value gap getting ran through, which should now act as inverse. We have another bullish fair value gap with a displacement acting as my entry, right? All of these things is what we want to start to see to have a high quality setup. So when I saw this, I alerted it. I said in the chat, I'm looking for longs. I got nice and tapped in right here on that wick to the downside. And notice when price is efficient, when price knows where it wants to go, it will act efficiently. And notice right when this gets tapped in, we shoot straight up to that buy side level, just straight up. Notice there's no hesitation when we want to get that draw on liquidity, right? That to me gives me even extra confidence coming out of this trade, knowing that, yes, I followed exactly what the algorithm told me to do, right? And that's kind of what I want you guys to get out of this trade as well. So that's the only really trade I looked at going into today. Now, the next trade I possibly was looking at taking, but I didn't take, was a possible short. And we'll go over that right here. Now, once NQ came up here, right, again, I was focused on this 15-minute fair value gap because this was kind of what was going to be giving my buys for the rest of the day. If we were to run through this, definitely expect to run the highs. If we were to respect this and go lower, we could possibly maybe see new lows. But again, we are in that 4-hour bullish fair value gap, so I'm not super bearish yet. So I'm kind of waiting for ES to also give me confluence on something. So when I see NQ having displacement to the downside, I'm taking this as buy side's now swept. We're rejecting that 15-minute fair value gap. I'm looking for price to come up into this fair value gap to maybe give me a short entry. But when I start to see price kind of settle here And then we end up taking this initial low first. This is when I start to think that I'm on the wrong bias here, or at least I didn't get my entry. So when ES or NQ comes down here, we sweep internal. I'm not really looking to take shorts anymore after that first low's taken, right? No, most of the time, this could act as a sweep to then go higher. Now, once I see us come in here, I told everybody I'm not looking to take longs right now. And the reason is because the time where we actually came in this candle went boom, just massive candle up to this level. And it was very quick. It was fast. It was like a pop in price. And the people that were watching it could, you know what I'm talking about. And knowing the urgency of watching price action go to the upside there, I was a little bit hesitant, and that's why I stayed out of this, because we swept internal here, bounced up. That means my entry is going to be a little bit late. And I want to start to see what ES is doing. And at the time, looking at ES draw seems to be higher. So that's giving me a lower probability setup on NQ, right? Looking at the 5-minute on ES here, noticing where we are in price action. Looking at ES 5-minute, we just swept this sell side level. Now coming up, now retracing back to the downside and respecting that inverse fair value gap. There's a volume imbalance right here. And once we start to get volume to the upside, look at what this becomes, right? This move to the upside on NQ, which is what we think is a retracement to our short entry, is now a break of structure to the upside on ES, right? That's something that we have to now notice. And in the chat, if I was to actually pull this up here, let me see if I can find it. But I basically said, if ES creates an imbalance here, we should run back to the highs. Let me go. Where is it? Let me see if I can find it. Right here. So at the time, when I was looking at possibly taking those shorts, I noticed that there's two different draws on ES and NQ here. So why should I take a possibility of taking a short when ES is telling us the exact same opposite, right? So at that point in time, you don't know where market's going to go. It all depends on which one's stronger at that point, which one's going to push price. And we know that NQ's already done its job here, right? What is most likely to happen? Well, we have to think about bigger time frame. Number one, both have swept that internal sell side level, right? Both have already done that. Now, just because we came up and swept internal does not mean we're going to continue to sell off, right? We have to focus on what is the overall bigger draw here. Another thing we have to focus on is ES and NQ are both in a 4-hour bullish fair value gap. So now that I see this move to the upside, this is the first time in price where we get a break and an actual imbalance. And this is exactly what happened. I said, if ES holds this 5-minute fair value gap, we'll go to the next high. And look what happened. NQ or ES created that imbalance. We retraced back into it, and we went right to that next high and ended up going right to the highs. And NQ ended up making new high day. So noticing, if you have a bias, right, one thing I want you guys to be focused on as well is not being married to that bias. You have to be able to understand where you could be wrong, right? Because at one point in time, our job is not to predict what's going to happen. My job is to take all of the data being constantly fed to me and be able to switch my bias like that, right? Because that's all it really takes for you to realize that you're on the wrong side, right? Now, this setup doesn't look bad at all, right? 15-minute, we have swept that internal, we have displacement, I'm waiting for a short. But if I wasn't to notice ES and what ES wanted to do, I would have taken a loss here, right? So it's being able to prevent losses like that just based on the probability of something, right? Noticing what everything else is doing. If ES and NQ do not have the same draw and liquidity, you should not be taking that trade, right? Because it's going to be lower probability. Does everybody understand that? All right. Okay, at this point in time, you guys can, anybody want any trades you want me to review? Let's see what trades you guys took today. Justin, the fair value gap at 10:25 a.m. failed to hold bullish. Do you think this was too early looking for long since we had reached the 4-hour fair value gap on ES, which I think was the draw at the time? Yeah, I do believe it was a draw at the time. So fair value gap at 10:25. Are you talking about on ES or NQ? Yes, I would not have been looking to take any longs here. NQ, okay. Probably going to be the same answer on NQ. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be looking here. Again, noticing structure-wise, right? Now, if I was to take longs here, I would have to put my stop at this low because a lot of the time this action is going to rail you. The reason I took it here and the reason this was such a precise entry is because of all the things added. SMT, inverse, market structure shift. Now that we've built all this accumulation, right? Because we're trading a bigger time frame. We're bouncing off a 4-hour fair value gap. If we get a 1-minute internal structure to the upside, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go run back to the highs, right? Because we're too zoomed in. Now, this trade was on a 1-minute, but it was on a 1-minute after we've now had structure form on a bigger time frame, right? It was all this structure has now formed, right? Creating accumulation. Now, keep in mind as well here, though, it might not be a bad trade, but you would have to risk differently, right? A stop at that low. The reason is because notice here, this bearish fair value gap gets ran through. Look how this ends up holding the entire rest of the day. This acts as inverse the entire rest of the day. Notice the wicks are doing the damage. The bodies are showing the narrative. There is not a single body close below this inverse fair value gap, right? Notice that first bullish fair value gap of the day that ends up getting ran back to the upside. We end up coming down, holding, coming down, holding. Again, the wicks are doing all the damage here, right? Stopping out all those traders, faking out all the people, stopping out all those, long traders because they're getting whipped back and forth just to jump back in and get stopped out again, right? But notice what the candles are doing here. We never break below this. We continue to hold one here, one here, one here, one here, and then we get that bought back up. That's precision. So yes, longs, in my opinion, would not be the best here. But if you were to enter here and put your stop here, you still would have made money on the trade. But again, you'd have to hold through all of this because you're not understanding time and price. Justin took this trade today, entered off high resistance. We were forming mixed with SMT rejection off 15-minute buy sign balance, sell sign efficiency. Precise entry was off the 5-minute. Busy informing 5-minute market structure shift. Keep in mind, at the time, we also saw turtle soup trade, which I took on MES. So I do like this trade. Wait, what was this? Okay, let me see. I'm guessing, was that 5-minute? So the trade that I would look for here would be looking to see this hold here. And the reason is this price action looks like we want to squeeze to the upside. Again, I know a lot of people are probably like, oh my God, we're rejecting this 4-hour fair value gap, right? We need to sell off here. But once this gets ran through, we're fully bullish. We're fully bullish because this shows that price has already done its thing. We don't want to go lower here. We're bouncing off a 4-hour. We've swept internal. When we come up here, we sell this, and we don't see this hold bullish or bearish. We're very bullish. Again, noticing what's happening right now. What is happening right now? What's being respected? What's being disrespected? We just had a sell-off after taking buy side. This needs to hold bearish if we want to see lower. It gets ran through. So what do we expect the drawn liquidity to be? Whatever the external high is, right? So I would be looking to see this fair value gap hold bullish. We have relative equal highs now formed here. Once this holds, I'm now looking for internal, right? Holding 5-minute fair value gap, displacement of the upside, pull back to fair value gap. This would be my long entry. First target would be here, letting the rest run to buy side. So again, that would be a great trade as well. Yes, I will be trading AM tomorrow. Yeah, Dave's been in the chat helping with order flow. He is very educated on order flow, so me and him have been talking. trying to get him a part of the team and helping with order flow. Very good trader, talking about mixing order flow with ICT. So I don't let it confuse your bias. Order flow is supposed to help us have better understandings of what we're doing and make our edge even more precise. I did actually take this trade live as I didn't see it, but have you just seen it backtesting? Can you rate it? This is scout model. This is scout model setup. So yeah, looks good. I took the same trade 1030 on NQ. How can you know in real time that it's not enough structure if it seems like almost the same setup, excluding the S&P that you took? Let me see. 1030 on NQ. Now, you can, but again, at this point in time, you're taking this off here, right? Now, again, this setup would still work. If you're trading this, you get displacement to the upside, and you're waiting for, again, there's no really entry here. I wouldn't have taken a long because, number one, if we get an imbalance here, I'm not taking an inverse here because that's terrible risk to reward. Number two, there's no imbalance here for me to take a trade. Now, there is one here, but we never got tapped in, right? And once this initial high is here, I'm not looking to take a long here, right? So there's no really entry here for me, right? And just like there's no entry here for me because we form equal highs. Thoughts on taking shorts on NQ 9:56 a.m. No, I would not look to take shorts here because sell side's already been swept. All right, let's talk about my bias going into tomorrow. So, zooming here back out to the 4-hour, noticing what price is doing here, right? Let's clear the charts here. What's being respected, what's being disrespected? Going back to just understanding the draw and liquidity, right? This is how I find my daily bias. What are we doing here? Zooming out to the daily first. What's just happened? Big daily fair value gap. What's happening? Respecting consequent encroachment, big displacement out of the range. Just by looking at this, what do you think the draw is? Just by looking at this chart. This high, right? So that's my bias going into the rest of the week. I think we go for buy side. This big move to the upside. Now, what am I now extra looking for? I'm looking to see this 4-hour fair value gap get ran through, which we're starting to right now. We have a close below. We'll see if we hold this. We definitely could have it is a possibility we could have a big candle back down and reject, but I would like to see this continue and then act as inverse. And then I would expect the draw to be that first, the next high going into tomorrow, and then that external high. So, zooming in, what would I want to see? Possibly this imbalance hold, or see sell side swept to then go higher. Right now, I need to see a lot more internal structure start to form, though. But I am bullish. So there's two things we could do here. Hold this imbalance, and then have just a straight push up, which kind of what I'm expecting. I'm expecting to see probably a fast move towards that high. Or we could come down here, reject, sweep internal, and then go back higher. Or this could become, if somehow we're still bearish, right? Because we still could just reject this. It's again, we're waiting for price to tell us what it wants to do. If we get a fat candle here and then a fat candle here, definitely would probably expect to see that low. But I'm definitely more bullish here. What's the difference between trading NAS futures and NAS CFDs if they move the same at the same time with price being very similar? I honestly could not tell you. I've never traded CFDs, so. Will Dave join the lives? I'm not sure yet. Right now, Dave is just here helping out. All right. That's pretty much all I have for you guys tonight. Get some rest. I will see you all tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your night, and I will see you all tomorrow morning. Let's get it. Let's keep killing it. Peace.